Hello, today we're going to look at just general advice when approaching the Home Economics Scientific and Social exam. It's absolutely imperative that you read every question carefully, making sure that you can answer all three parts of your exam question. Now, a reminder to you that we are not going to go into that exam where every question that is asked is answered directly in a home economics textbook or in your home economics notes. Many of the home economics questions will involve what we call higher order thinking. In other words, you will have to think on your feet. You will have to be able to draw from your knowledge of the course content and basically, I suppose, put the jigsaw pieces together. These types of questions we know can come up either on part D or part E on the question 1 on section B, but they can also come up as part of the 50-mark questions or even in the question for the core. So just to be aware of that before the exam and that you have practiced these types of questions. They usually relate to what is going on, I suppose, in the world at present. So use a fluorescent marker to highlight the key terms on a question. So imagine that you've already chosen the questions that you're going to answer. So you are allowed to bring a fluorescent marker in. Needless to say, it cannot be used on the first booklet where you have your short questions and your long questions written. But I did say that you will get a second booklet which will have the questions which will be asked from question B and question C. So when reading a question, the first thing you do is get out your fluorescent marker and highlight the key terms. Also highlight the number of marks allocated for the question. For example, I've taken question 4 from section B 2024. Note I've highlighted here in yellow, analyse changes in consumer shopping patterns over the last decade, 20 marks. Name, evaluate, 18 marks. Describe, 12 marks. Now when you've highlighted the key term and the number of marks, you will then try and work out a possible marking scheme. Now I'm emphasising possible because we can't guarantee that the number of points that we have chosen are exactly the number of points required by the official marking scheme. However, I keep saying to you in our pre-recorded classes, always err on the side of caution. So in the event, unless they say otherwise, if I see 20 marks, I will always give 5 points. If I see 16 marks, I'll always give 4 at 4. You will never, ever, ever give 8 points at 2 marks each. If I see 12 marks, I will give 4 by 3, but the actual official marking scheme might be 3 at 4. But don't torture yourself for the remainder of the month of June, July and August until you get that grade. Why didn't I put in that extra point? So always err on the side of caution. So the fact that the first part A was 20, I would have given 5 points at 4. It said in part B 2 different methods of payment used by consumers. So straight away I know that it's 2 at 9 marks. So I now need to make up what that 9 marks is composed of. It's composed of a name and evaluate. So if I see 9 marks, I'm thinking that is 3 at 3 marks. Use some logic here. Of those 3 points, name would probably be 1, which is 3 marks. So we'll put name, 3 marks. So for my evaluation, it's going to be 6 marks, 2 at 3. What does the term evaluate means? I have to look at the pros and cons. I have to look at the advantages and disadvantages. So of my 2 points, 1 advantage, 1 disadvantage. You need to do that before you start writing. We all know, or we should know, that you never ever ever write essay style answers for home economics answers. We know that we should answer in what we call a point format, but please don't just write 10, 11, 12 random points for your content. Structure your answer before you start to write. So I know, by having worked out a possible marking scheme, 3 will go for the name and they'll only want 2 subpoints. The term evaluate then means advantage, disadvantage, and there you are working with the official marking scheme, not against it. So the name was actually 3 marks, which we need to note there. So the name was 3 marks and the evaluate was 2 at 3, and 1 would have been an advantage and 1 would have been a disadvantage. And then finally part C, describe for 12 marks the protection provided by the Consumer Protection Act. I would have taken 4 at 3, but officially it was 3 at 4. But like I said earlier, always err on the side of caution. We just mentioned there, always answer in point format. Never answer in an exam or essay, an essay style answer. And this is really key, as you can see there, to working with the official marking scheme, because you could potentially miss out. Develop the points according to the number of marks allocated to each point. A reminder, every 4 marks in home economics is 1% of your Leaving Cert grade. So for example, if something is worth, say, the causes of obesity, 16 marks, 4 points at 4 marks each, I can't have 2 lines for each of my 4 points. Why not? Because logic is saying 16 marks is 4% of my Leaving Cert grade, so I need to develop each of those 4 points really well. Back up with examples. Now, I cannot emphasize that enough. A little bit like if you do business as a subject, you have to have specific examples to qualify the statement that you have made. This one is particularly important. Practice answering homework questions. So practice them from past Leaving Cert exam papers in real time. You can go back to our video there on advice on the time plan for this. But just say, for example, you get a homework question. It's a 50-mark question, and you spend 50 minutes at home doing that question. You produce a fabulous answer, full of content, full of detail, and you get 50 out of 50 when you get your homework returned. That is not realistic. You need to be able to get all that content and detail on paper in 22, 23 minutes. So there's no point in having the shock on the day when you go into the exam and say, oh, I know that really well, and you're writing. And instead of sticking to your 22, 23 minutes for your 50-mark question, you end up spending 40 minutes. It throws everything out, and you could potentially come out of your exam not having completed it. There's absolutely, I don't care what anyone says, there's no excuse for that. We all know going in, it's 150 minutes and you must stick to your time plan. So I can't emphasize that enough. I think maybe I've gone on about it enough there. So stick to your time plan. You can only use blue and black pen in the exam. You are allowed to bring coloured pencils, and you are allowed to bring, say, a pencil. Now, a lot of students say to me, Sandra, I know you said we could bring coloured pencils, but realistically, it was so demanding in terms of time, I wasn't able to use it. However, there will be parts of the exam where you could use a coloured pencil and it would work, which I'm going to mention now. So in terms of blue and black, I use the Uniball pens. They're so clear on a screen if an examiner is looking, or when they're looking at your exam paper. However, I still would have blue and black Bic biros because, say for example, we haven't been asked to lipid since 2018, which happens to be 7 years ago. And they ask about, describe the structure of a monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, saturated fatty acid. I will need to show on my diagram for each of the three a carboxyl end and a methyl end. And in our recorded classes, I say to you, if they're looking for a carboxyl end and a methyl end for every one of those fatty acids, highlight in yellow coloured pencil the carboxyl group and the methyl group. But if you're using something like a uniball pen, it'll bleed when you go shading it. So that's where you can use your blue and black and Bic pens. So coloured pencils can be used, blue or black pen only. Absolutely no Tipp-Ex allowed in your exam booklet. Now, this is something, I suppose it's nearly a pet hate of mine at this stage, and that is where, particularly when students are going through their mock exams for the last few years, I have to, I suppose, say to them, this is, an indication you did not read the instructions to the candidate before the exam. And that is something, again, for all subjects as well as your home economics. Make sure that you go back over last year's Leaving Cert exam 2024 and look at what advice was given. And one thing that is given, one piece of advice that is given to all students is how to fill out the top of every single page of your booklet. So I just want to show you here what this page or pages are going to look like. So remember, we said we have two booklets. We have booklet A with the short questions, and then you're going to see many, many pages that look like this in booklet, in the first booklet. And you are required to fill in a box at the top of each question. So just say I'm on question 1 on section B, which is our obligatory question. You fill in 1B. Then you have different parts, A, B, C, D. Occasionally we have part E. In the side margin, you write 1B and then your part A. Answer part A, leave 1 to 2 blank lines, move on to part B. Leave 1 to 2 blank lines, move on to part C. So the examiners here with their set of marks, they have marks allocated for A, you answer A, they move on to B, you've left a line or two to indicate you too are moving on to a new section of the paper. If I was answering, for example, maybe question 2 on section B, I would write 2B. If I am on to my section C, I have decided to answer question 4, the core. So it's question 4 on section C, and then you have the part, say for example, A1, A2, and so on. So that's very, very important that you write the number of the question and the section at the top of every single page on that booklet. The other thing that I would say to you, which a lot of students are not doing, start each question on a new page. So say hypothetically, I finish my question 4, or we'll take another one, go back earlier in the paper, and say it is question 2 on section B, and I've answered part C, and I finish here, and I've all this blank space below. Do I start my next question here? I do not. Even though I might only have used 1-2 lines on this page, I have to go on to a span new page and fill in the next page with my next question, which might be question 3B, part A. So you must start each question on a new page. And I would strongly advise that you do that for your Leaving Cert exam. So we'll go back there to our advice there, our general advice, and we'll move on there. So that's, as I said, extremely important. Moving on there, never begin a question on the same page, start a new page. And finally then, understand the terms and language commonly used on a home economics question. So we have words like discuss, outline, enumerate, list. And so many times students will say, how much information do I give if I see explain, if I see discuss? The most important thing to note is how many marks are allocated for each part of the question. That, I think, is probably the main way that you will know how much detail to give. Like we said earlier, for every 4 marks, that is worth 1% of your Leaving Cert grade. But then you have things like words like explain, always back up with an example. If you see the word structure, we always draw a diagram and we give a written note. We must give both. If I have 4 labels, for example, the structure of a yeast cell, if I have the outer wall, the granular cytoplasm, the vacuole and the nucleus, I must refer to all 4 parts in my written note. So what I have here are a series of various different key terms that regularly come up on the home economics exam. These notes are on the platform. So when you log into your Grinds 360 account, you click on My Subjects and you go to the on-demand classes. And the very top row of those classes, you will find the PDF to go with all of the advice regarding the layout of the exam, the time plan, and more importantly, the general advice on the exam. So things like describe, and I've taken example. We also have words like classify, we have differentiate, we have given account or discuss, we have other words like name, identify, state, list, outline, explain, and they for me are probably the most important ones. There's one I'm just going to add on here, and that is, I've said it numerous times in the on-demand classes, and that is the word structure. So whether it's the structure of a yeast cell, the structure of a bacterial cell, the construction or structure of a refrigerator appliance, you must, or if it's the structure of an amino acid, the structure of a triglyceride, we always draw a diagram. And it's, like I say, quite tragic when people draw a really nice diagram, it's labelled very well, and then they forget about the written description. It's automatic that both of those go hand in hand unless otherwise stipulated. So I hope you have found these 3 videos helpful, and like I say, you can contact me, Sandra at Grinds360, if you have any other questions. And the very best of luck in your exams.